It is 6:47 in the morning and your alarm has not gone off yet, but you are already awake, staring at the ceiling, doing the math you have done every day for the last 6 years. Rent, car payment, the minimum on the card you keep telling yourself you will pay off. Daycare, if things ever get that far. You do the math and the math never changes, and somewhere in your chest something quietly cracks, the way ice cracks under weight it was never built to hold. Your phone buzzes. It is your manager. "Emergency call before the stand-up," he says. Something about the Morrison account, something about numbers that do not add up, something about how this could blow back on the whole department if it is not fixed before 9. You sit up. Your heart rate climbs. This is the moment. Not because the Morrison account matters. It does not really. But because in the space of 90 seconds, staring at that message, you understand something you have been avoiding for years. If you do not walk into that office and become the person who fixes this, you become the person who gets blamed for it. There is no third option. Not today. You get up. You get dressed. You make the drive on autopilot, and somewhere between the third red light and the parking garage, a decision forms in you that you do not say out loud to anyone. Not your manager, not your coworkers, not even yourself in the mirror. You decide you are done playing this game by their rules. You do not quit that day. You are not stupid. You walk in. You fix the Morrison account. You take the thank you email like a soldier takes a medal he does not care about. And you go back to your desk, and you open a private browser tab, and you start reading. This is where it begins, quietly, invisibly. The kind of beginning no one else can see, because it is happening inside your head, while your hands are still typing spreadsheets for someone else's dream. You have started plans before. Everyone has. A budgeting app downloaded and abandoned inside a week. A side hustle idea scribbled on the back of a receipt and lost in a jacket pocket. You know the pattern well enough to distrust yourself a little, to wonder if this is just another version of the same false start. But something about the fear from this morning feels different, heavier, like it has finally outweighed the comfort of staying exactly where you are. You learn there is a difference between income and wealth, and you had never actually been taught that difference. Not once. Not in 18 years of schooling that prepared you for exactly this desk and exactly this ceiling. You learn that the people who look rich around you, the ones with the new cars and the vacation photos, are often the ones most trapped, financing a lifestyle that keeps them exactly where the system needs them. Productive, compliant, and one missed paycheck from panic. You start doing something dangerous. You start telling the truth to yourself about your numbers. Not the numbers your bank app shows you in a rounded, comforting way, but the real numbers. What you earn, what you spend, what is actually left over once you strip away the subscriptions and the impulse orders and the coffee you buy because it is easier than admitting you are exhausted. The number that is left over is small, humiliatingly small, but it is not zero. And zero was what you expected. That night, you do not tell your partner everything. You tell them you are thinking about budgeting more. They nod, half listening, and you let them believe that is all this is. Because if you say the real thing out loud, if you say, "I am trying to build a way out of this whole system," it will sound insane. It will sound like a burnout talking. So you keep it inside, where it is safer, where no one can talk you out of it before it has a chance to grow. Week 1, you cut the subscriptions you forgot you had. $43 a month back in your pocket. Week 2, you start packing lunch again, the way you did when you first started this job, and still believed hard work alone would be enough. Week 3, you open a separate account. You name it something boring on purpose, something no one would think to ask about. You put $200 into it, and it feels like nothing, and it feels like everything at the same time. This is the part no one glamorizes. There is no explosion of freedom. There is no dramatic resignation letter. There is only the quiet, grinding discipline of a person deciding, alone, in the dark, that they are no longer willing to spend their one life financing someone else's. Some nights, the discipline feels heroic. Most nights it just feels small and tedious, like checking a bank balance that barely moves, like packing the same lunch for the fourth day in a row and wondering if any of this actually adds up to anything. You do it anyway. You have learned, slowly, that the feeling of progress and the fact of progress are two different things, and only one of them can be trusted. At the office, nothing changes. You still smile in meetings. You still say yes when your manager asks you to stay late. You still play the game, because the game is currently the only machine generating the fuel for your escape. You just stop believing the game is your identity. That shift, small as it sounds, changes something in your face. People start commenting on it without knowing why. You seem calmer, someone says. You seem different lately, someone else says, half suspicious, like you might be hiding something. You are. 3 months in, your separate account has $1,100 in it. It is not enough to change your life, but it is enough to prove something to yourself that matters more than the number. You can do this. You can build something that exists entirely outside your job title, something that answers to no manager, something that cannot be taken from you in a layoff email. You start reading about income that does not require your physical presence to keep flowing. Not the get-rich schemes, you know better than that by now. You have learned to smell desperation dressed up as opportunity. You look instead at boring things, skills you already have that other people would pay for. A spreadsheet template you built for your own budgeting that a stranger online would pay $12 for. Freelance work in the exact skill your day job already trained into you for free. You start small, painfully small. Your first sale online is $9. You stare at that number longer than you have stared at any paycheck in years, because that $9 did not come from someone approving your timesheet. It came from you, existing as a source of value on your own terms, for the first time in your adult life. This is where the psychology starts to shift underneath you, like tectonic plates you cannot feel moving until the ground has already changed shape. You catch yourself sitting differently in meetings, spine straighter, opinions less desperate to please. Nothing about your job title has changed, but something behind your eyes has. And once in a while you catch a coworker glancing at you a beat too long, as if they sense the shift without being able to name it, the way animals sense weather before it arrives. You start noticing how much of your identity was built on being needed by a system that would replace you within a week if you disappeared. You start noticing how much of your self-worth was rented, not owned, handed to you in performance reviews by people who did not actually know you, who could not, because knowing you was never the job. At night, you lie awake doing math again, but it is a different kind of math now, not survival math, escape math. If the side income grows by this much a month and expenses drop by this much, then in this many months you cross a threshold. Not the threshold of quitting immediately, you are not reckless, but the threshold of choice. The threshold where staying becomes something you do because you want to, not something you do because you are afraid of what happens if you stop. 6 months in, you have $2,200 saved separately, and the side skill is generating around $400 a month. Inconsistent, unglamorous, real. Your partner finally asks what is going on. You tell them the truth this time, the real version, and you brace for the doubt, the practical objections, the fear dressed up as concern. Instead, something in their face softens, like they had been waiting months for permission to want the same thing. That night, the conversation changes everything. It is no longer just your quiet rebellion. It becomes a shared one, still invisible to everyone else, still hidden behind the same job titles and the same commute and the same forced smiles in the same fluorescent-lit meetings. But now, it has a witness. Now it has a partner in the plan. You had underestimated how much weight that secret was costing you until it was no longer yours alone to carry. Sleep comes easier. Arguments about small, unrelated things start happening less. It turns out most of the tension in the house was never really about dishes left in the sink. It was about a truth being rationed out in pieces. And now that the truth is whole, the house feels lighter too. Month 9. The side income crosses $1,100 in a single month. It is still not enough to replace your salary, but you begin to understand something that most people trapped in the system never let themselves understand. It does not need to replace your salary all at once. It only needs to grow faster than your dependence on the job shrinks. The two lines just need to cross. At work, a promotion opens up. The old version of you would have fought for it, stayed late for it, sacrificed weekends for it. The new version of you watches a coworker fight for it instead, watches him burn himself down, chasing a title that will own more of his time in exchange for a raise that will barely outpace inflation. And you feel something you were not expecting to feel. Pity. Not superiority. Pity. Because you remember being him, and you know exactly what corridor he is running down, and you know exactly where it ends. You do not tell him what you see. You cannot. If you tell him, you have to explain the whole plan, and the plan only works quietly. The moment it becomes a conversation, it becomes something people have opinions about, something people try to talk you out of for reasons that have nothing to do with logic and everything to do with their own fear of what your success might say about their choices. So you stay silent. You let him take the promotion. You clap for him in the meeting where they announce it. And that night, you add $300 to the account, with his name nowhere near it. Month 14, something happens that almost breaks the plan completely. Your car fails. Not a small repair, a real one. The kind that used to mean putting it on a card and watching the debt spiral start all over again. This is the test. This is the moment where the old version of you and the new version of you fight for control of the decision. You pull from the account. It hurts more than any other spending decision in the last year, because that money was not just money. It was proof. It was momentum. It was the physical evidence that the escape was real. Watching it shrink to cover the repair feels like watching the plan fail in real time. But it does not fail. It bends. You keep going. You do not quit the side skill. You do not go back to zero discipline. Within 2 months, the account is refilled, and something in you has changed permanently, because you have now proven to yourself that setbacks are survivable, that the plan is not fragile, that you are not fragile. There is a version of this story where the car repair becomes the ending, the moment where the plan quietly dies and the old life resumes without ceremony. The way most plans die, not with a dramatic collapse, but with a slow, forgivable surrender. You think about that version sometimes, the one where you simply stop trying, where nobody would even notice or blame you for it. You do not choose that version, not because you are certain you will succeed, but because you have already tasted what it feels like to have a second floor beneath you. And going back to having none feels worse now than the risk of continuing. Month 18, the side income crosses $2,000 a month, consistently, not as a fluke, but as a pattern you can now predict within a reasonable margin. Your monthly expenses, stripped down and disciplined, sit just under $3,000. The gap is closing. You start doing something you have never done before in your career. You stop volunteering for extra projects at work. You stop staying late. You do your job well, competently, professionally, but you stop performing exhaustion as a badge of loyalty, because you finally understand that loyalty was never being rewarded, it was being harvested. Your manager notices the shift and does not like it. He says something in a one-on-one about wanting to see more initiative from you, more hunger. You nod, and internally you almost laugh, because the hunger did not disappear. It just stopped pointing at his goals. You leave that meeting and, for the first time, you do not replay it on the drive home the way you used to replay every piece of feedback, dissecting it for hours, letting it decide your mood for the rest of the week. It simply exists now as information, not verdict. The version of you that needed his approval to feel steady is not fully gone, but it no longer runs the show. And that alone feels like its own kind of quiet promotion. Month 22, you sit down and run the numbers one more time. The real numbers. The ones you learned to stop lying to yourself about almost 2 years ago. Side income. Average of $2,600 a month now. Core expenses, $2,900. The gap that once felt like a canyon now looks like something you could jump. This is the part where most people expect a dramatic resignation, a video posted online, a speech to the office. That is not what happens, because that was never the plan. The plan was always quiet. You give your notice on an ordinary Tuesday, in a short, professional email, thanking them for the opportunity, giving proper notice, offering to help with the transition. Your manager is surprised. Your coworkers are surprised. Someone asks if you got a better offer somewhere else, and you say something vague and polite, and you let them believe whatever story is easiest for them to accept, because the truth would take too long to explain to people who are still asleep inside the same system you just walked out of. Your last day is unremarkable. No cake, no card signed by everyone, just a badge you hand back at the front desk, and a parking garage you walk out of for the final time, into ordinary daylight, on an ordinary afternoon, while the rest of the building keeps running exactly the way it always has, because it does not need you. It never did. That was always the illusion it needed you to believe. You go home. Your partner is there. You do not celebrate loudly. You do not need to. The celebration already happened, quietly, in 1,000 small decisions no one else was watching you make. 6 weeks later, an old coworker messages you, confused, asking what happened, saying they heard you left but did not hear why, saying you seem different in your photos now, calmer, lighter, like something has been put down that you used to carry without realizing how heavy it was. You do not send a long explanation. You send 4 words back. I just stopped running. Somewhere out there right now, someone is reading this at 6:47 in the morning, doing the same math you used to do, feeling the same crack forming quietly in their chest. The question is not whether the exit exists. It does. It always did. The only question left is this: how long are you willing to keep running before you finally let yourself walk?